Throughout history, the messengers of God have called on people to believe in His existence and oneness, told them of moral virtues, and commanded them to do good and avoid evil. These blessed people, who called on their peoples to earn the approval, mercy, and paradise of God, have always been subjected to verbal and physical assaults from deniers. But the messengers have never been worn down by the pressure and attacks from deniers, and have waged a difficult and honorable struggle for as long as they have lived. They have borne the responsibility placed on them by God with great fortitude and determination, and in the finest manner, and discharged their obligation to preach the Word. Just like the prophets before him, our beloved Prophet Muhammad, may God bless him and grant him peace, was also subjected to countless acts of persecution by the idolaters and unbelievers for preaching the true faith, and suffered countless attacks from insults and false accusations to attempted murder. The idolaters wanted to prevent our prophet preaching the true faith because that would undermine the order they had established based on injustice and unfairness. The messenger of God called on them to believe in God, the one and only, alone. He wanted them to abandon the false deities they worshipped and their superstitious faiths they had inherited from their forefathers. Leading members of the tribe regarded this call of the prophets as a great threat to their established order. That was because all their rank, position, prestige, social status, and economic power were based on this false system inherited from their ancestors. They therefore began trying every possible means to hinder the prophet's message. They established a broad opposition to him, and in their own opinions they mocked him, spoke insulting words about him, made false allegations, and severed all social and economic relations with him and the believers around him. They even had the effrontery to injure our prophet by attacking him full of hatred with sticks and stones. When none of these achieved their aims, they went so far as to attempt to kill God's messenger. But all of their snares were thwarted in a manifestation of God's promise to devout believers, because He has promised believers that God will not give the unbelievers any way against the believers. Therefore, all the traps set by the deniers in order to prevent the spread of the moral values of the religion were created already thwarted. Indeed, the idolaters and deniers suffered a total defeat in the time of the prophet, and the prophet and the true believers communicated the word in the finest manner and attained the victory. In this film, we shall be seeing the pressure and attacks inflicted by the deniers on our prophet from the moment he began his work as prophet, and his exemplary moral values and determined and unwavering struggle in the face of them. As they had with all previous prophets, the idolaters denied the true faith preached by our beloved prophet and made extraordinary allegations against him. Those of the tribe who turned to disbelief made a terrible false allegation against the prophet, saying he had written the noble Quran himself, and even that he had received assistance from other people to do it. Surely our prophet is beyond that. These slanders uttered by the deniers are reported in verses. Those who do not believe say, "This is nothing but a lie he has invented, and other people have helped him to do it. They have brought injustice and falsehood. They say, it is myths of previous peoples which he has had transcribed, and which are read out to him in the morning and the evening." Our beloved prophet preached with the Quran so that his people would believe. Through God's blessing, he preached the moral values of the religion in the wisest manner, showed them the strongest evidence, and gave them the best examples. But despite this, because of their pride, oppressiveness, and stubbornness, the idolaters insisted on not believing, raised all kinds of difficulties, and refused to abandon the false religion of their forefathers. The idolaters were unable to come up with any legitimate or logical grounds in attempting to refute the prophet. So their low intelligence led them to try to prevent people following the prophet by using such psychological warfare techniques as mockery or humiliation. This attitude on the part of the idolaters is one that all the prophets and true believers throughout history have been confronted with. In the Quran, God reveals how the prophet faced similar situations in the past, and that he is the helper of sincere believers. Messengers before you were also denied, but they were steadfast in the face of the denial and injury they suffered until our help arrived. There is no changing the words of God, and news of other messengers has come to you. In another verse, God clearly and irrefutably reveals the fate awaiting those who deny his messengers and place difficulties and troubles in their way, unless they abandon that behavior and repent. We sent a message among every people saying, "Worship God and keep clear of all false deities. Among them were some whom God guided, but others received the misguidance they deserved. Travel about the earth and see the final fate of the deniers. As revealed in this verse, injustice inflicted on messengers who genuinely, honestly, and sincerely love and fear God will not go unrecompensed, neither in this world nor in the hereafter. Eventually, our prophet and his companions overcame the deniers, who met the fate that God promises for such people. One of the most frequent ways that deniers have attacked the messengers of God is by way of false allegations. It is revealed in the Quran how the messengers of God and those devout believers who followed in their path were subjected to many highly unpleasant slanders. Slander is a technique that deniers seek to spread immorality and corruption have employed for thousands of years against devout, honest, and moral people, and that they hand on from one to another. By spreading slanders, the people in question seek, in their own eyes, to wear believers down and turn them away from what they know to be the true path. This method has been employed against all of God's messengers and their companions throughout the course of history, from the prophets Noah, Solomon, and Moses, right up to the prophet Muhammad. However, it is a very important and certain fact that no slander has ever achieved its aims or prevented the messengers from discharging their divine responsibilities. On the contrary, slanders have always been instrumental in increasing believers' fervor still further and drawing them even closer to God. The messengers always faced the slanders uttered against them with exemplary patience and fortitude, and never submitted to the pressure from the deniers. They continued to live by the moral values commanded by God, and to call people to the true path. The life of the Prophet Muhammad is also full of examples of the slanders that messengers have been subjected to down the ages. Idolaters attempted to pressurize our prophet and, in their eyes, distract him from his divine struggle by both slandering him directly and uttering false imputations against his blessed family. The deniers in his tribe sought, in their own eyes, to use vile slanders to blacken the name of our prophet in order to neutralize him and turn people away from him, as well as spreading the lie that he had collected followers around him in order to further his own ends and interests. The messenger of God is above and unfettered by all these slanders uttered by the deniers. The fact is, like all other prophets and true Muslims, the Prophet Muhammad sought no worldly gain or advantage. He sought no fee or reward from anyone, merely calling them to God's path and reminding them of their true abodes in the hereafter for His approval, mercy, and paradise. God reveals in His verses that in contrast to these unjust and inaccurate slanders made by the deniers, our prophets sought no fee or reward from anyone. You do not ask them for any wage for it. It is only a reminder to all beings. In many verses of the Quran, God absolves His messenger from the ugly allegations of the deniers. Some of these read as follows. Your companion is not misguided or misled, nor does he speak from whim. It is nothing but revelation revealed. Or is it that they do not recognize their messenger, and therefore do not acknowledge him? Or do they say, "He is a man possessed," when he has brought the truth to them? But most of them hate the truth. Equally, no messenger came to those before them without their saying, "A magician or a madman." Did they bequeath this to each other? Indeed, they are an unbridled people. It is a fact revealed in the Quran that deniers will slander believers and say hurtful things about them, and that this is an immutable law of God. Almost all the slanders employed by deniers against the prophets are still used by deniers against believers today. Accusations of lying, madness, sorcery, deviance, self-interest, and a thirst for power and influence, arrogance, pride, impurity, and a desire to change the faith are just a few of these horrendous slanders. The scale of the slanders uttered against a believer is proof of his or her determination to live by the faith and its moral values. Under such circumstances, Muslims must be on their guard and scrupulously avoid forming any negative opinions regarding their Muslim brothers, or doing them any injustice by listening to such false allegations. They must behave in such a way as to defeat the deniers by making it clear they do not believe in their slanders and attach no credence to them. It must not be forgotten that the fact that the majority of people believe a slander and oppose Muslims does not mean that the accusation is true. God has revealed in one verse that following the majority may lead one astray. If you obeyed most of those on earth, they would misguide you from God's way. They follow nothing but conjecture. They are only guessing. Moreover, it is also revealed in the Quran how one must behave if accusations against Muslims are leveled by people who rebel against God. You who believe, if a deviator brings you a report, scrutinize it carefully in case you attack people in ignorance and so come to greatly regret what you have done. Deniers have always imagined they can frighten or wear down believers in various ways. The most intensive assaults were directed against the messengers. But because the messengers have known that all power belongs to God, they have never been intimidated by or fallen into despair because of these assaults from deniers. The more our prophet told his people about the religion of God, the greater was the violence of the assaults from leading members of the tribe. The leaders among his people saw that under the leadership of the messenger of God, the moral values of the religion were spreading rapidly, and that the mockery, defamation, slander, and similar methods of intimidation they resorted to were not working. At this, they decided that a plot against our prophet would be a more effective method. This plan of the deniers is described in the Quran. When those who do not believe were plotting against you to imprison you, or kill you, or expel you, they were plotting, and God was plotting. But God is the best of plotters. The use of the word plot in this verse is particularly noteworthy. Instead of openly attacking the messenger of God, the deniers tried to stop him through a plot or conspiracy. This plot was intended to have the prophet imprisoned, killed, or exiled. However, as revealed in the verse, the deniers can never harm the messengers in any way. God appointed the messengers, and it is He who will protect them. And again, as revealed in the verse, it is those who plot against the messengers of God down the centuries who will be disappointed. Many verses in the Quran describe physical attacks on messengers. Just about all messengers were threatened with death, torture, or imprisonment by the leading circle of their people, and these threats were usually translated into physical attacks. They killed some of those who believed in God and His messenger in order to turn them from their path, and attempted to slay others. They imagined that by killing the messengers in particular, they could eliminate the religion of God and turn other believers away from the faith. There is no doubt that this shows they constituted a community that was incapable of proper reasoning, as is also revealed in the Quran. Our prophet was also exposed to such attempts by deniers during the course of his life. Idolaters frequently met together to barefacedly plan to kill the messenger of God. They eventually decided on a plan by Abu Jahl. Under that plan, a strong, reliable, and armed young member of each tribe would be chosen, and they would all attack the messenger of God together, at the same time and try to kill him. They imagined that as a result the Prophet's family would be unable to deal with all the tribes of Quraysh, and that the Quraysh would pay them the relevant blood money. However, God did not permit the idolaters to carry out this plan of theirs. One night, when they had surrounded his house, our Prophet and Abu Bakr abandoned Mecca and set out on the Hijra to Medina. As a miracle from God, the idolaters around his house failed to recognize him. When they realized what had happened, they set out after our blessed Prophet and his companion. But thanks to God's mercy and protection, they failed to catch them or do them any harm. We are told in accounts that after the prophethood had been bestowed on him, the Prophet's wife, Khadija, introduced him to her cousin, Waraka, a scholar from the people of the book. What Waraka said about the Prophet is particularly noteworthy. Khadija then accompanied him to her cousin, who during the pre-Islamic period became a Christian and used to write the writing with Hebrew letters. He was an old man. God's apostle described whatever he had seen. Waraka said, "This is the same one who keeps the secrets whom God had sent to Moses. I wish I were young and could live up to the time when your people would turn you out. Anyone who came with something similar to what you have brought was treated with hostility." After a few days, Waraka died. The deniers imagined that they could exile the Prophet Muhammad and his companions from their homes and thus disperse, weaken, and eliminate them. But God reveals that those who forced the messengers from their homes are the ones who suffered the real devastation. How many cities we have destroyed, greater in strength than your city which has driven you out, and there was no one to help them. This is a law of God that applies in all ages. It is impossible for those who force people out of their homes because of their faith to remain in them for long. Our Prophet and the believers with him later returned to Mecca, which they had been forced to abandon, and established a definitive victory over the deniers. Contrary to what the idolaters expected, the believers did not disperse and fall apart, but coalesced together and grew even stronger. This is highly important in showing that no alliance against believers can ever succeed. The deniers imagined that they could halt the prophet's message by resorting to various physical measures. But they failed to bear in mind that God has determined all things in destiny and that He always helps believers. Almighty God has created these snares set by the deniers in destiny in such a way as to rebound on their own heads. No matter how comprehensive and cunningly designed the snares of the deniers may seem to be, they are irrevocably condemned to fall apart and work against them. This is a promise made by God in the Quran. Some of the verses that reveal that the snares and trickery of deniers are all in vain and will eventually work against them are as follows. But then when a warner did come to them, it only increased their aversion, shown by their arrogance in the land and evil plotting. But evil plotting envelops only those who do it. Do they expect anything but the pattern of previous peoples? You will not find any changing in the pattern of God. You will not find any alteration in the pattern of God. They hatched a plot, and we hatched a plot while they were not aware. So look at the end result of all their plotting. We utterly destroyed them and their whole people. All the snares, plots, conspiracies, and slanders against the prophets that might seem to be evil at first sight actually all eventually worked out for the best. That is because there is no other power than God. It is Almighty God who creates all traps. God has created all snares laid down by deniers for believers in destiny in such a way that they will fall apart and benefit believers, while deniers are harmed by them. People who plot against Muslims imagine they are doing this with their own minds, but even these people have also submitted to God. They produce the plots commanded by God, completely unchanged. This is revealed in another verse. Those before them plotted, but all plotting belongs to God. He knows what each self earns, and the unbelievers will soon know who has the ultimate abode. It is also revealed in the Quran that deniers will actually end up plotting against themselves. And likewise, in every city we set up its greatest wrongdoers to plot in it. They plot against themselves alone, but they are not aware of it. All the snares and trickeries set against the prophets might superficially appear to represent difficulties for them. But God has also established a system for the setters of snares, and God will certainly keep His promise to the messengers. The prophets and true believers will inevitably emerge victorious. This is an immutable law of God. It is revealed in several verses of the Quran. Some of these read, Our word was given before to our servants, the messengers, that they would certainly be helped. It is our army which will be victorious. As for those who make God their friend, and his messenger, and those who believe, it is the party of God who are victorious. The lives of the prophets are full of examples of victories over the plots of the deniers. For example, Pharaoh killed all male children and imagined that he had taken sufficient precautions. He oppressed the faithful, but was still unable to hinder the prophet Moses. His people plotted to cast the prophet Abraham into the flames, but God saved him by cooling the flames. The prophet Joseph's brothers wanted to eliminate him by throwing him down a well, but God overturned that plan, freed Joseph from the well, and made him head of the treasury. Traps were also set for the prophet Jesus, but when they tried to kill him, God raised him to the sky, and the deniers' plans were foiled in a manner they never anticipated. God is he who creates as he wills, and who always bestows victory on his messengers. Deniers have always regarded believers who dedicate their lives to winning the approval of God as a great threat to their own twisted, established order. When we look at the history of Islam, therefore, we see that believers striving on God's path by following in the footsteps of our prophet have always been subjected to verbal and physical assaults, pressure, and attempts to hinder their activities. Believers on the path of God have always been followed and kept under surveillance by deniers, imprisoned, oppressed, threatened, and slandered, and attempts have even been made to kill them. Deniers use the same methods to hinder believers who are closely devoted to their religion of God and who are honest, determined, and dedicate their lives to spreading the moral values of Islam as they did to oppose the prophets. However, it must not be forgotten that such situations that may appear very difficult and troublesome from the outside are actually a spiritual training ground for believers who have fully submitted themselves to God and who trust Him and rely on Him alone. Such troubles are a source of joy and inner peace, a means of purification for believers who hope for God's pleasure, mercy, and paradise. They are an opportunity to draw closer to God, to witness His signs and see His close interest in the faithful. These struggles between deniers and believers always follow the destiny ordained by God. It is God who creates believers and their enemies. It is revealed in the Quran that God appointed special enemies to the prophets. In this way, we have appointed as enemies to every prophet Satans from both mankind and from the jinn, who inspire each other with delusions by means of specious words. If your Lord has willed, they would not have done it. So abandon them and all they fabricate. In this way, we have assigned to every prophet an enemy from among the evildoers. But your Lord is a sufficient guide and helper. Since it is God who has created both sides, it is also He who determines the outcome. God has ordained in destiny that His messengers will be victorious. It is impossible to vanquish the messengers. This truth is revealed in the Quran. God has written, "I will be victorious, I and my messengers. God is most strong, almighty."